Well, hello. I found a bald head, and today we're painting on the suboccipitals. These pint-sized little powerhouses may be tiny, but I like to think about them like little parts of a dam that a beaver built. There's just so much that they're in control of. I'm starting by finding the Nuchal Ligament, as that's going to be the dividing line between the two sets of four that lay on each side of the spine. And then I want to make sure that I delineate the two nuchal lines, because the inferior nuchal line is going to be one of the major attachments, as is the space between both of them on the back of the skull. I'm painting the cervical vertebrae on the right-hand side of the neck because I want to represent the depth of the suboccipitals on the right-hand side and the more superficial muscles on the left. The neck in general is one of the most beautifully designed structures that really creates a segue between the head and the metaphysical, and the trunk and the physicality of our nature. So going back to the analogy of the suboccipitals being like pieces of a dam, the flow between the head and the body and vice versa is really controlled by whether or not these muscles are relaxed. And when they get locked up, this is one of the main causes of tension headaches. I'm starting to paint the individual muscles of the suboccipital group in, and I'm starting with the Rectus Capitis Posterior Minor, otherwise known as little number 1. Moving on to the next muscle and layered a little more superficially is the Rectus Capitis Posterior Major, otherwise known as little number 2. And you can already start to see how tiny these muscles are compared to the head and the neck and other larger muscle groups in the body. Moving on and moving out laterally, the next muscle I'm painting on is the Oblique Capitis Superior, otherwise known as little number 3. At this point, I'd like to pause and take a moment to ask the deeply philosophical question, who died and left these muscles boss of the massive bowling ball that lies on top of our neck? And lastly, rounding or squaring or triangulating it all out, I'm painting on the Oblique Capitis Inferior, otherwise known as, you guessed it, little number 4. The myth of how these muscles got their nickname doesn't come from their malicious intent to pull the head back so that it looks up at the sky constantly, but more about the fact that they throw a massive hissy fit anytime you look down for more than 5 seconds. All of this has been clearly exacerbated by the invention of the computer and the cell phone and dishes and laundry. As I start to paint on some of the more superficial muscles on the left-hand side and represent what it would look like if you cut those away on the right-hand side, revealing these deeper suboccipitals, it's interesting to note that the suboccipitals actually work in balance with a lot of the jaw muscles. And although there's no correlation between what the jaw does to the spine, a lot of the tension and balance around what the head and the skull does, these muscles are responsible for. So it would make sense that when you press into those jaw muscles or the suboccipitals, you feel those trigger points that shoot into what feels like a headache, and the underlying tension that creates trigger points is possibly the root cause of most headaches, mostly tension headaches, that you see. The compact, dense nature of these muscles makes this one of those areas in the body that divides my clients into two different portions, those who love this work and those who hate it. The best piece of advice I can offer is, if you are going to dive into this area and you're working with somebody who doesn't like this pressure, soften this area into a position where their head is tilted back as if they were very pompously looking down their nose at somebody else, and then gently start to ease into that pressure. Remember that you are working with an intricately structured dam that is controlling the flow between the head and the neck, and if you were to tear that apart, you could do more harm than good. I also included the greater occipital nerve into this anatomy body painting project. And there is a lesser occipital nerve and the third occipital nerve, but the greater is just so great. One last little fun tidbit about these bad boys is that research has shown that 1 or 2 of them might be diving in between your vertebrae and attaching itself into the dura mater of your spinal cord, which is just so freaking cool. As for what these muscles do, they rotate the head and neck to the same side if you want to peek over to the person next to you secretly. They also laterally tilt the head and neck to the same side if you're feeling a little bit quizzical. And they rock and tilt the head back into extension if you want to look up at the stars or if you're dating somebody really tall. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, I want to thank my Patreon supporters, and I also want to thank the amazing community that is massage therapists and body workers. I have heard from so many of you during this lockdown, and I want to remind you that for as long as we are required to stay at home, I am offering a 15% discount on my online store. I'll include that discount code in the description below. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay calm.